say this is Shawn Bay. He joins us all the way from New York today. He founded eScholar, which is sort of, I describe it as a student analytics company. Is that accurate in a way?
That's pretty good.
Way back in the late 90s. And Parul Singh, who joins us, former MIT Sloan grad, now has founded her own startup, Gradeable, which sort of also does test analytics in a very different and novel way. So they're both going to talk about the tech industry this day.
Great. Terrific. Well, thanks a lot for having us here. You picked a fantastic day for me to drive up. I live in Connecticut, and it's beautiful, and I'm looking forward to the drive home as well. One question I've got, really, I'd like to ask you what some of the things are that you're looking to hear from us, questions you'd like answered. You can hit us now with it, or you can hit us as we roll along. So we've got a few slides here, so we know what some of the points are that we would like to cover. But I think really the key to this is making sure that we hear from you what you're looking to understand from us. We've been, Parul and I both have been down the path of starting our own businesses in education, and actually for me even before that in big data. Now big data in education for the past 17 years. But it's funny, buzzwords in that business have changed over time. I like to think of the industry that I started out in. I was at Procter & Gamble in 1985 after I got out of grad school, doing what we came to call data warehousing, and that was the coolest, hottest thing in about 1986, let's say. And then it was data mining, and that became like the coolest, hottest thing. And it was the same thing we were doing with data warehousing. And then it was business intelligence, and that was the coolest, most amazing, hottest thing. And now it's big data. And I've still been doing the same thing. It's just my industry's always had a really good marketing department, I guess. Because I've been involved in the coolest, hottest thing for 29 years. But so let's talk about what eScholar is. And I started that company. Really, we were asked by a school district to put together a data warehouse for them. So my background is not education, it's purely data. And my thinking was, well, I've worked in a lot of different industries, and school districts and education must have a bunch of data, we'll figure out what it is. I really didn't know what the problem was I was trying to solve, except trying to pull together data. What we realized very quickly was that, yes, there's a tremendous amount of data in education. It's incredibly hard data to deal with. Now, the company that I founded after I was first at Procter & Gamble, and then their competitor Unilever, doing data warehousing and big data stuff for them into the early 90s, and then started a company called Vision Associates, where we did that same kind of stuff for everybody, around the world. So that's actually the parent company of eScholar today. And we built the first data warehouses for IBM, for Coke, for Pepsi, for Verizon, the big insurance companies, you name it. And here we were now building a data warehouse for a school district. And well, we found out that data was amazingly hard to deal with, because unlike a lot of other industries, you've got very different kinds of measures that have different time frames and that measure student performance in different ways. The answer on a question on a test, an attendance day or period, an event, a goal, something that stands a long period of time. Very different kinds of data that have to tie back exactly to millions of individuals. We said, oh, this is great. This is like a really hard technical problem. We were technical folks. We didn't know anything at that point about education. And we could look at the data and say, even though our only experience in education was as students, that there was a lot of value in this. We could see things that happen outside of an individual classroom. We could see things that happen over time. We could gain insights that even a very involved teacher was not going to be able to see. They just couldn't. They could be very involved, but you're just not going to ask all the questions that we could actually answer right out of the data that we could see in front of us. So we decided that I decided that was where I was going to focus my attention, on that problem for the long term. And now it's been 17 years. So what I realized from that, in looking at the data, and I still believe this, is this was an incredibly valuable problem to solve, and no one at that point was out there trying to solve it. We can talk more about eScholar. I can answer questions about it. I could go on for 45 minutes on that. But let's talk about starting a company here. I want to talk about what I learned from starting, I guess, two of them. Now one is a subsidiary to the other, and working for Fortune 500 companies. So that was a ball. I mean, that was great. So I really have no complaints about either one. What we learned about the education industry, and then the big question, like, why am I still doing this? 17 years later, why am I still doing this? Parul's going to give you her perspective on this too. I mean, she started, it's been, what, 2 years? From the time that she began the company Gradeable. And it's a bit of a different approach, but very related to what we're doing. So we met here at an event at the Sloan School a couple of, maybe 18 months ago, and have stayed in touch because what we're seeing is we're kind of looking at the same problems from different angles. So, all right. eScholar right now, we started out working with a single school district, and now we integrate data for 20-something million students from early childhood through post-secondary education. So the business certainly has expanded. We were the first doing this, and we've been, I suppose, the biggest doing this all along. We're not the only people who are involved in this, but for the most part, our competitors would be people who, and states who do this custom. So in terms of packaged product, we're really pretty much the only one out there. Massachusetts, for example, actually does their own stuff custom. We're not in Massachusetts, but we do New York statewide, Pennsylvania, Texas, and 13 states that do this statewide. And so what we've been doing is collecting together data from all of the different sources on these students, and now putting those data in the hands of educators and now also students to guide their own education. And I'll give you just a couple of examples of the types of things that you can do with these data. As you've got pre-K through 20 data here, let's say, for example, you want to be a veterinarian when you grow up and you're fourth grader or something like that. Well, we've got data on people who are doing that now. And we've got data about what they did to get there. Now, we can't share that. It's all confidential data. But we can actually share with you something, you, the fourth grader, something about the pathway that are relevant to becoming a veterinarian. So, for example, I mean, you might be a fourth grader and you say, okay, I want to be a veterinarian because I love horses. I grew up in Kentucky, so this is very relevant. Okay, but that's, we can look at the data and say, okay, that's great, that's wonderful, that's fantastic, that's not good enough. If you want to be a veterinarian, it's like, okay, you can't spell organic chemistry yet, in the fourth grade, but let me just tell you about organic chemistry. So that's going to decide whether or not you get to go on, and be a veterinarian, or you have to go find, some alternative. Well, let me just tell you about it now when you're in fourth grade, so you can start thinking about those science courses that maybe you don't think are too exciting. Make peace with it, or decide that maybe something other than veterinarian is relevant to you. Those are just some of the things that you can do with these data to help students and help teachers. So those are the kinds of things that we do. Just a few things about starting a company. I want to make sure that I give Parul the opportunity to talk more about this because it's more top of mind for her. I did this years ago. Okay. But I do remember a few things on it. One is, and I'm interested in Parul's perspective on this and asking this question, is if I had known what I was getting myself into, I was only a crazy person to do it. So how many of you are actually thinking about, I shouldn't have said that first, how many of you are thinking about starting a company, entrepreneurs? Okay. Good, you're crazy, but I don't regret it, I really don't. But had I known, for example, just one silly example. Now, okay, I'm sorry if I'm going to be telling you if you didn't know this already, that you have to estimate what your income taxes are going to be based on your income that you expect to potentially get when you're starting out from zero. And if you're off, by a certain amount over your first quarter or your first year, you have to pay a penalty. So just think about that. Let's see, I'm starting up, I'm hoping to God I don't go bankrupt. So I'm really hoping like to get above zero, in my first year. And if I beat zero by too much, I have to pay not only the taxes, but I have to pay a penalty because I estimated what my income tax was supposed to be. And there's like 100 of those kinds of things out there. So I'm only going to tell you one because I really don't want to scare you off. I think that starting a company is a fantastic thing. But when you look at all of the things that, you look at our economy and say, well, we've got the best startup environment in the world, you kind of go, it could be better. I'm not, there are things that could definitely be better about it. And then there's the things, if you're coming from a Fortune 100 company and you've got your own office and all that kind of stuff, I mean, there's the shock of, good grief, I actually have to do like everything myself. I was lucky enough to be able to start with 2 other people. I think that anyone who started completely on their own, that's just another level of, this is really hard. You've got to be a marketing person, a technology person, and all these kinds of things. So it pays to not really think a lot about the barriers and the hurdles because there's lots of them here. It's good to just kind of wade in there and work through them. I think if you think too much about the barriers, you probably wouldn't do it. So it's like I said, good not to dwell on those things. I'll answer questions about it, but it would be exciting. And really, the penalties aren't that bad. If we did end up making money our first year, which was good. So yes, I did. One of the things about raising money, I'll give you my experience on that. I've been facing throughout this the choice of, do I raise money for investment money coming in, or sell the next deal that's going to be product revenue, or services revenue. And our company is more than 10 million, less than 15 million in revenue right now, and we've been at this for 17 years. And I've gotten, I've gotten a very small, way under, $1 million of outside investment, and that was only recently when we've become so successful here. So the decision all the way up until just a couple of years ago has always been, okay, I could chase getting investment, money, or I've got this potential deal here in front of me, and I can focus all my effort on closing this deal, here to license product to someone or services, and I don't have to pay that back. I just have to do the work that I committed to do. So for me, anyway, we self-funded, through this. And whenever I was faced with that choice, and really it came right down to that. I can spend, the next couple of months, a few times I actually did spend that kind of money with, or kind of time with private equity investors and things like that. I can spend the next couple of months going through a business plan that I don't have in enough detail for them, and arguing and negotiating with them, or I can just go close this deal for the state of Texas. Get money down. So that's been our choice, and I'm not saying that that's the right one to make. I mean, there are definitely some people who've taken in funding and turned around, sold the company pretty quickly. You can get really rich, a lot faster than I'm not rich. I'm not doing it very fast. But one thing I'll say about this industry: how many of you are thinking about starting a business or being in the education industry? Okay. I would describe it as it's a marathon, here to do it. I mean, if you think that you're going to be the next Google, here, I'm sure you've seen some of the headlines. You got one of your neighbors here, ConnectEDU, just declared bankruptcy last week, and in bloom with $100 million from the Gates Foundation, just went out of business the week before. Everybody thinks that I've got the greatest idea, and you're probably right. You probably do. And it's going to take over the education industry by storm. But it won't. I don't care how great it is. It won't take it over by storm because we can talk about this. Things just don't change that fast. There's a lot of reasons that they don't. It's not for lack of ideas, it really isn't. So you've got to be prepared for the long haul, on this. You absolutely do. Even those companies that, if you look at wireless generation, SchoolNet, they took in venture funding, and they didn't make $1 zillion, overnight, but, they sold out to Rupert Murdoch or to Pearson, and got hundreds of millions of dollars over 15 years, not 6 months like, some tech startups do. Really looking for the, make $1 billion in the first year. It's like, this is not the right industry, I don't think, for you. But even you look at those examples, those are some of the most, the highest valuation type examples in education, and they haven't worked out that great for the investors, the last couple of years. Those have been, going to News Corp and to Pearson. It's a tough industry, it really is. If you're just looking for get rich quick, this probably is not a place to go. Just a few things. Okay, why is that? Now, to start out with, okay, presumably one of the reasons you want to do this, and the thing that drove me is, okay, could there be a more important industry than this one? I mean, it's the root of everything. It's like if we're going to have technology, we're going to have, improvement against, climate change, you name it, better leadership for the country, everything is dependent on education. Everything that we need to do to advance our society. Absolutely everything. So you look at it and go, this is an incredibly important problem. So how come things don't change faster? One of the reasons, you just think about this industry, the whole of it, pre-K through 12 and post-secondary, here, enter in it. And this is my view, I'm happy to argue, I will argue with you. It's a top-down industry. Every other industry, pretty much on the planet at this point, is driven by its consumers. Education's not. I mean, there are elements of it. I mean, sure, we all have choices of where we went to college. We don't have all that much choice, actually, in pre-K through 12 for most people. So you can go to school where you live. You take the curriculum you've got. You do the textbooks that they decide to do. You just think about it. Any other industry, think of grocery stores. Somebody, the CEO of Safeway decided, what you're going to get when you walk in the grocery store. Like, okay, that's the way it works in this industry. So one of the things that we're doing by empowering consumers is, all right, we give them the ability to make some decisions about, what they're going to do. It's a finer level of detail than you get to make now. The decisions you make now, I mean, you decide what school you're going to go to, even pre-K through 12. I decided to live in Fairfield, Connecticut. So I made this gigantic decision for both of my kids that cost a whole lot of money and was a 25-year now investment for me, so my kids could go to school in Fairfield, Connecticut. So we make these giant decisions, very expensive decisions. What we need to be able to do is break it down into much smaller decisions that the consumers can make. Decide to go to MIT, fantastic school, much better than what I would do. But you're making a giant decision, about it. A whole lot of money and, and a big chunk of your time to do that. So what will change this is when, like other industries, you get to make smaller decisions more frequently for less amount of money. An individual decision. I'm not going to argue that you spend too much or spend too little in education. One of the things about it that's inspiring to me and continues to be is the educators. Now, I can look at this and get really frustrated with this industry at times, but there are amazing people, and I'm sure you know this from your professors, the great school, the great teachers you had when you were in elementary school, and those kinds of things. Those are the people that I think keep it all moving. Okay, now how can we leverage that, and move forward better? One of the things that's a struggle here is, okay, who are the buyers, the economic buyers of your stuff? And it's funny, Parul and I have talked about this quite a bit here. You've got users of your stuff and then buyers of your stuff. For us, the buyers are usually statewide contracts, whole state of Texas. We get one check from the whole state of Texas. But the users of our stuff are all teachers, and students in Texas. So, they're completely different things here. How do I appeal to one and make this very useful and get paid by the other? So it's a challenge. And you look at, and it's funny, Parul and I talked about this a lot too, here. When you look at the buyers, now students do buy stuff. I mean, clearly you buy notebooks, you buy books, you do all kinds of things, where you're actually the buyer. But in a lot of cases, I mean, for us, we're selling to these larger entities that are buying, large numbers of students. Again, there's a disconnect. And, of course, we're the bigger checks. What's the bigger buyers? The whole state. Here, going and gathering up $1 from every one of, a million students is hard. Getting a few cents from, one entity for millions of students, like, okay, well, it's not easy, but it makes more economic sense anyway. And there are a lot of outside forces. Is anybody familiar with the In Bloom debacle here and them going out of business? No one here? Okay, we got one. The Gates Foundation decided to come into the industry and essentially do what eScholar does with our data warehouse. And they actually talked to us, and decided they could do it better than us. With $100 million, invested over the 3 years, and now they just finally shut it down. And we didn't, do it to them, really. I mean, they kind of did it to themselves here. But you've got these kinds of things. You've got foundations, politicians. There's been there's a big argument about the Common Core. You look at that argument, so much of it is kind of silly argument. I mean, people are saying it's a federal takeover of education. I completely don't believe that. I mean, I know pretty well it's not a federal takeover of education. So you've got these kinds of outside and you say kind of non-marketplace forces in education that you have to contend with. It's like, why would anybody invest $100 million to try to replicate what we already do in the industry? Happens all the time in education. So the question, okay, I've given you all the bad news, and it's funny, Parul, has teased me about this too. It's like, how come you do this? You seem to like it. Why do you do this? Well, you got this bad news about it. The people that I get to work with, folks in my company, the educators I get to work with, and the students, you see that you can actually make a difference. You can actually help kids get a better education. So for me, as a big data person, this is definitely the most important thing I'll ever get to do. I think we've made a difference. We haven't made as much of a difference as I would have thought in 17 years, but we made one. People weren't using data to analyze and drive education 17 years ago. They are now. A little bit of a step back because of the English debacle, but yeah, we'll continue to move forward. And the opportunity to improve it, we're just getting started. We really are. So, all the bad news, I just want to encourage you. We need, the enthusiasm and the intelligence that you have, to improve this industry. It's not because it's all failing. There's some great things happening in education. I'm sure they're happening here. But we can do a lot better. We can do it a lot bigger scale and make it a lot more available to everyone. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Parul and let her tell you about her thing.
How are you guys doing? It's so great to be back here. I was Sloan 2012. Let me just figure out. So, as I was saying, I was in your seat 2 years ago and miss it very much. It's awesome to be back here. Okay. So just to kind of give you a really quick 1-minute intro of myself. Before I came to Sloan, I was a software developer out of undergrad, and I was a product manager at New York Times for their website and for an analytics company, a startup in Boston. And I came to Sloan, and I really wanted to start something in education. So I pretty much started investigating ideas within 6 months, like during my first semester. I met another classmate who was also interested. We started brainstorming. I picked a couple of areas of interest to me. They actually happened to be content, analytics, and gaming in education, and then started to explore problems that I wanted to solve. And I took a really classic, as a software developer, I was an interface developer. I loved designing stuff. So, and I took a very classic kind of approach. I went out and I interviewed like 30 or 40 teachers, and I kind of asked them what their biggest problems were. I actually said, what do you hate the most about your job? And what do you need to do it better? And pretty quickly kind of uncovered the problem that we ended up solving. And it was funny, teachers told me that they needed more time and more money. And I said, well, I can help you with one of those. I can't really help you with the other one. But we ended up trying to look at the time problem. And as I dug more, I learned that teachers were spending a third of their time grading and giving feedback. It's such a crucial part. It's really where you learn in many ways when you're forced to recall something that you learned in an assessment, and then you get feedback to kind of guide whether you're on the right path or not. And so I started looking at that problem. What my startup Gradeable does is that we collect data. We do data collection from unstructured assessments, which sounds very kind of techy and geeky. But what it means is that we kind of tried to capture the difference between these two things. So everyone's taken a ton of multiple choice, tests in their lives, including myself. And right now, there's more and more of a drive to get more data from students, and all of it looks like multiple choice or bubble sheet format. And what I learned from talking to teachers is that good teachers kind of try to avoid multiple choice. And I think it's pretty intuitive. I mean, I definitely remember guessing on enough multiple choice questions in my life to know that it never felt like a satisfying way of answering a question. But teachers would also tell me that they needed to be able to see how students think. And I think that if we really lived in a world where all of the testing and all the assessment that we had to do was multiple choice, I mean, I just think, I don't know, that sounds like it just sounds horrible to me. And but yet it's a trend, because right now that's the easiest way to get data on student learning. And as Shawn's company has done, there's so much that can be captured from this. I mean, we see kind of big data making a big impact in every other part of our society, pretty much. But what I wanted to be able to do was to make it easier to get data from other types of assessments. So we developed a workflow where we essentially developed a format for assessments that is very free-form and unstructured. It gives teachers flexibility to essentially create paper-based worksheets with any kind of question. So a math proof or an essay or anything like that. Then we digitize them. And I'll talk about why we decided to focus on paper right after I explain the whole workflow. We digitize it with an iPhone or a scanner. We actually took time to design a scanning dock. We call it our grading inbox, which is really like low cost kind of thing that you can keep on a teacher's desk. And then when students hand in their work, there's a QR code on each piece of paper, and their phone works as a scanner. So that we heard from teachers that that they weren't using existing products like Scantron, because they were not allowed to leave their class on time. So they couldn't really, like, if we wanted to do, my vision initially was that students be able to walk into class, turn in something, like their homework, and then be able to the teacher be able to walk over to her iPad 5 minutes later, pick it up, and get a sense of what she needed to teach that class, because where the class was struggling the most. Obviously, in an all-digital world, and we started with K-12. Obviously, in an all-digital world, you're probably doing that assessment electronically, and you're turning it in electronically. But we believe that the core thing that the teacher is doing, giving feedback, reviewing something, is still there. Like, it's still a human who's looking at it, marking it up, saying, okay, this is a logical error in what you're doing, or here's a grammar error. And computers can do some of that, but I still think they're not great at it. And it's something, I still think it's an area of value. It's something that is hard to commoditize, basically. The teacher's attention, looking at something, giving you feedback, kind of redirecting the student. So we just tried to make that transaction kind of more valuable by taking everything else out of it. So what we kind of set up is a way for teachers to grade according to a rubric, like kind of grade in a standardized way, score things, give comments, and we gather more data from that so we can analyze the comments. And then we give a very basic set of metrics. And we're very 80-20 driven, so we just try to tell teachers like the top things they need to know so that they know what to teach again. And we decided to focus on paper because most of the classrooms that I went into when I was doing my research were paper driven. And also I believe that, it's a lot harder to handle paper-based assessments than it is to handle electronic assessments. So it's actually, we're probably gonna add digital assessment to our product within, by the next school year. But this allows us to give teachers a choice. And then we end up with a product that kind of handles both scenarios, and meets the bulk of classrooms where they are right now. So it was surprising to me as well to find that even though I carry around, I think, 3 devices at any given time, but in schools that's still not the reality. So the official teacher to student, student to computer ratio across the U.S. is 3:1, and so a lot of times that's a shared computer most of the time. And I've been into classrooms where the teacher says, "That's my computer in the back of the classroom. It's older than I am." So it's still very diffuse, the technology kind of diffusion is still not really there yet. So some of the stuff we've done since I graduated 2 years ago, we've been piloting in New York City public schools. We just got endorsed by Teach for America, and we're starting to explore partnership and licensing opportunities with other companies to kind of help us with distribution. I was part of the Mass Challenge Incubator and also the Learn Launch EdTech Accelerator, which is here in Boston. I'm happy to talk about that if anyone's interested. And we were nominated as a Invention of the Year last year for EdTech. So I decided that I was going to organize this just in terms of do's and don'ts that I feel like I've learned from my experience so far. And so I'm just going to kind of go through this quickly, and then Shawn and I we thought we would leave a bulk of the time just for questions, because we'd like you guys to drive kind of the discussion a little bit. So one huge do is do work with classmates across MIT. I started out with a classmate, a Sloan classmate who was initially interested in doing development for us, and also picked up a designer who's in the architecture program at MIT and who I met in the media lab class. The media lab classes are probably my top #1 recommendation for people that are interested in entrepreneurship, because they do attract people from across the entire university, and you get a chance to kind of work on something, I think, in a very much more concrete way than just the intro entrepreneurship classes where you're just doing a business plan, which is, I think, largely just anyway. So definitely, while you're here, try to seek out people. And I know some of you are already starting things while you're here, which is also a great thing to do. Actually, working with people on a project or something. I used Gradeable as a class project for my last 3 semesters. So, it's just nice. You get a whole team of people who are helping you build something or do some research for you, or vetting the pricing strategy that you think you're going to go out with. So that's a big do. A second big do is to identify pain point, and I think that's especially valid in education because it's very easy to kind of think that you've got something that just would be so cool to use. Oh, I wish I had a note-taking app that just, I don't know, did just let me take pictures of my projects. I'm not even sure. I see a lot of really early stage ed tech products which have a huge coolness factor, but that there isn't necessarily a clear person that would actually purchase what it is, what that product is. And I think that's a really big challenge in the edtech market. In other areas, in other tech sector areas, kind of, it is possible to have something which is free for a long time and eventually you monetize. I don't think that's really a great revenue path to head towards, to drive towards in education, because it's not the same thing. Like, it's not like a Facebook or a social media play where you can be like, well, I'll just get a ton of users and I'll monetize later, because you can't sell that data to anybody else. Like, you have privacy concerns, and there's there are a lot of products that are already out there that have gotten a ton of usage, but that have never had, I still don't know where their revenue will come from. So maybe they will find a way, and actually a lot of the most successful edtech products have done that. So if you look at like Class Dojo or Edmodo or I don't know, even I think those are two. If you end up diving into this field, those are names that you'll hear about, and they've gotten huge amounts of huge traction, like tens of millions of users all across the world, and they're free. And I think that being free is a huge thing that drives their adoption, but it's still unclear, I think, how they'll monetize. So I think be cautious. So the way that Shawn approached his business is actually to try to get revenue up front, and I think that that's a valuable way, because you do need to kind of manage that. So another thing I would say is definitely to do is to, this leads right into what I was saying, is do get customers first, like even before you have a product. When I was at Sloan, I helped co-found something called the Lean Startup Challenge, and so it's just a way of a methodology of trying to start something based on an idea, trying to sell it in, like, prototype it in really inexpensive ways and get customers before you necessarily have something. And I do think that that works in education. I think you can, you know, if you know enough to be able to go into a district and tell them, this is a product that I have, this meets a need that you have, and get them interested in signing up, then that's great. That's like the best validation that you can get. Because if you can't do that, it should be a sign to you. Another do, I would say, is learn to code. I was a software developer for 6 years before I became a product manager, and I found that experience invaluable for me. I believe that as a business, even as like how many people are Sloan students versus other? Okay, so almost everyone. Even as the business co-founder of a startup, you want to be able to learn. You want to be able to know what you're talking about, and the extent to which you can even learn. I told Michael intern for Gradeable over IAP, and I told him this, that if you can prototype what you're doing before you need to bring on a technical co-founder, if you need one, you are miles ahead, because you sort of demonstrated your value, you demonstrated the product, and you can possibly start to demonstrate traction. If the other person is coming in and doing all of that for you, you have much less negotiating power. You just are much less in control of your business. So there are a ton of ways to learn easily, cheaply, online, for free. So it's something that I definitely think everyone, I tell my entire team, I make them all learn how to code. It's something I advocate very strongly. Another thing that I heard from a lot of other edtech founders, and it kind of goes to what Shawn was talking about it being a marathon, is you have to watch your runway. So one of the challenges that our business has faced is that it is a long sales cycle. So what they say about it being a long sales cycle is true. We've had schools where we go in where I walk in, I talk to the decision maker at the school, they love the product idea, they think it's within their budget, they really they're interested, and they say, we would like this, we want to buy this. And it can still take 6 months to kind of get a contract, and that's because a lot of times the decision-making process in a K-12 school is that you'll get introduced to someone, then some combination of a tech person and a teacher will vet your product to make sure that it works and that the teachers want to use it. So then sometimes we'll do like a 2-month trial or an 8-week trial or something like that. And then after that, you go back and you make decisions. And the buying cycle in schools is extremely cyclical. So people make purchasing decisions between about March and July or so, or maybe even August. But like April to August is kind of the time when they're actually buying things because they've got their budget for next year and they're starting to make like decisions. And so, you know, you won't necessarily get a contract until that part of the year. So it can still take 6 or 7 months. And so what I've heard from people that maybe come from other sectors is that it's very typical for a tech startup that, you know, you raise a seed round at $800,000, you hire a couple of engineers, you pay yourself, and then your burn rate is like $20,000 or $30,000 a month. And if you're doing that and you're going to burn through that money really quickly, like you're probably going to burn through that money in less than 2 years. And if you do that, it just is a big risk. Like I've definitely talked to founders who said things were going great, but then finally we got to the end of our runway and we had no choice, we had to sell. So I think that one of the lessons I've been forced to learn is just to be like ridiculously frugal. Like we spent less than $200,000 in 2 years. And I've done that by not taking a salary myself, like doing consulting work on the side, paying. I have an offshore development team now. So doing things to really, really cut our costs. I have a really young team that are willing to work for mostly equity, and so that's another reason. That's another way to do that. But I think that's one of the biggest operational risks that we'll face. So because the other thing you talked about was about investment, and I don't think I made a slide about this, but I'll just talk about it. It's different raising money in ed tech than it is in other areas, and we've had like relatively like visible, we've had great success, and we're having great conversations with investors. But it's also there are many investors that we go to who have some skepticism about the sector as a whole. So I remember Shawn said to me when I was starting that it was always easier. It was easier for you to get customers than to get investors, and I think that sometimes rings true, and that kind of is why I said a lot of what I said about getting customers before getting the product and stuff like that. I don't know. I guess the point that I was making is just that runway is really crucial, and I think it's one of the biggest operational risks that you face. If you get really lucky and you have figured out a really profitable segment of the market and you get some early traction, then you can raise as well. But still, you will face that kind of slow market, basically. So I think I sort of said this would be like trying to validate your idea, but don't just assume that someone's going to pay for your product and like because it's like really cool and you would want to use it yourself. Like as you know, Shawn kind of mentioned, like students don't necessarily pay for things for themselves. Teachers they do pay for things, but they've got a limited budget. So kind of try to figure out where you want to be in that. Who's your buyer, basically. Another don't I would say is don't go it alone. Doing a startup in general, and I would say that that's actually just general startup advice. Doing a startup can be really challenging, and it's so important that you have a support system. If you're doing things with someone else, it's a world of difference. Like you can split tasks. It's been great. I started out initially with another Sloan classmate, and he moved back to California, and I only recently hired another MBA for my team, and once I had that, like it multiplies your productivity so much, like just to have someone to talk to and to kind of split up all the. I mean, we do end up doing everything, but to have somebody else help with like, on a single day I might go from filing our taxes, to running, like deciding on a marketing campaign, to doing a whole bunch of like managing of our team members, to doing some product stuff, to writing a proposal. And to just split that up with someone is really great. And kind of to go along with working with someone, when you do choose a partner, don't forget to talk about the really difficult things, as in like what happens if it doesn't work out. So my co-founder and I, we ended up parting ways because he wanted to move back to California, and we had decided that we would keep the company here initially in Boston for 2 or 3 years while we got stable to have the development team all in one place. And he got homesick, like 6 months after we graduated, and decided that unless we moved the whole dev team out to California, he was going to leave. And that transition could have been really difficult for us, and it was difficult for us. But it was made easier by the fact that we'd kind of gone through, like looked up on the internet and gone through a checklist of what do we do, what do we do if one of us wants to leave? How many hours are each of us required to put in? Like what's the commitment? When are you not doing enough? Like things like that. Like we basically had a pretty ironclad, like in writing agreement about what each of us was going to be doing. And I think because we had that, it was just very clear, like when we got to that decision point where, I said, well, I don't want to move to California, I don't want to move the company to California. And he said, okay, well then I think I'm going to leave. And I said, okay. And then we just went according to our plan. We just, he invested a certain amount, walked away with however much he invested, and then we moved on. He stayed on as an advisor for a while, and we continued to go forward. But I think like one of the #1 reasons that startups fail is because founders don't work out. And so you really want I think you really want to lay that out loud in advance, because it's not pleasant to kind of go through. But if you've talked about it before, it's much better than if you try to talk about it when it's actually happening to you. And you definitely want all of that to be kind of in writing in some way. So I think that's the rest of my slides that I have. So I think I'm just going to open it up to questions. I mean, I'm happy to talk more about either founder things or accelerators or anything else that I talked about, and I'm sure Shawn will feel the same way. So do people have questions? And if other people if among you, people are already thinking of starting something, I'd love to also hear what your ideas are.
So I have a question about how you guys have been able to be successful post-adoption. I know like sales and procurement are obviously big parts of the ingredients to getting a lot of traction, but what do you do once the product is entered into the system to encourage teachers to continue using it so that they do feel successful in how it's technology, so that it's not one of those things that ends up in the corner of the classroom?
I think that's a great question. Do you want to take that question? Or I can answer?
Sure, I think we probably both have, that's a very real issue, I'm sure, for any company that's starting out. For us, that's something that happens with any of these things that are, like this cool data warehouse. Like, okay, everybody wants to have one, they get one, like you really have to use it, otherwise it's not worthwhile. And one of the things that we do is, this is one of the reasons actually that we try to sell large deals, whole statewide deals, or at least an entire district, typically a big district. For us, our target is districts that are more than 40,000 students, or whole states. Okay, our number of targets is actually low, over 100, but it's less than 200 in terms of those targets. Okay. For each one of those customers, they have an account manager that's always, in fact, it's funny, one of our account managers, Janet Darby, is back in the back of the room. She's responsible for one of our projects in the state of New York. And her job here is to make sure that all the time we're doing something valuable for the state of New York. And if you're not sure you're doing something that they consider to be valuable, I know it's staff turnover, change in directions, politics, all kinds of stuff happens. You've got to have somebody who knows, okay, here's what the strategic plan is, and hopefully we had some influence on that because we're working with people, we're team members with them. And our part in achieving that objective is this one. We're doing this one. And that's it. And the state of Mississippi is one that, they just had a new commissioner of education had come in. Okay, we were engaged in this. We had a huge amount of staff turnover there. But in some respects, we're seen as the folks who have some continuity on what's going on and playing a strategic role in it. So it's being very engaged in that. You can't just assume that what people found to be valuable right out of the gate continues to be valuable. Their priorities change.
I think for us, we're a SaaS business, and so we do it by kind of really closely watching our metrics. So we ask teachers to pay, right now it's $7 a month for our product. So we have very clear feedback on whether they're using it and whether it's valuable to them, because if it's not, they'll just unsubscribe. So I like that model because there's a lot of truth in it for us. I mean, we basically can just watch our metrics and see, like, are people using it this month? What parts of the product are they engaged with? We look at our funnel of, like within our product, like there are a couple of different steps that we take. And so we look at how many people are getting to the first step and the second step, like how far are they getting, and we try to improve the product based on those things. So does that answer your question?
So I was thinking a little bit less like reactive, and
Yeah.
seeing like, oh, so these teachers are using it this much time, this much usage, but more about something like proactive that ed tech companies can do to train, like engage teachers, help them feel like they can use the product correctly. Because ultimately that's what we want them to do, is not misusing it and like lose some of the value of the amazing product that you guys build. So kind of like, especially when you're trying to be lean, just hiring a bunch of account managers to like follow up with people may not be like the best way to go about it. So what type of strategies would you have to like be more proactive in that course of action?
So I guess what we do is that we create a ton of content that kind of is introductory, like almost like online professional development, like videos and guides and walkthroughs and stuff like that to kind of get people through the training part of the product. And then we do have like one person, we have a teacher evangelist, and I have her look every week at, how engaged, like we categorize our users in buckets, like we basically make, we categorize our users in a couple of different ways, but we make cohorts of like what month they sign up in, and then we look at how engaged they were that past month. So is this someone who's been using it, once a week, which is like our highest category? Is it someone who has, come back within the last month? Is it someone who logged into the product once and then never did anything? That's the other end of the spectrum. And so she actually looks at the numbers and the groups for every single one of those, and we do a certain amount of like outreach to them. So if someone like is dropping off, like, we actually automate a lot of this too. Like we have in our software, we kind of tagged like different actions, and then we tag like groups of people. So then we send emails based on actions. So if someone signs up, when someone first signs up for the product, we start a drip campaign where we'll send them an email like the first day, then the second day, then the 7th day, then the 14th day, to give them like hints about what to do next and like tips and tricks and stuff like that. And if they don't go further in the product, we send what we call intervention emails. But those are right now kind of, we're trying to automate those, but they're not automated right now. But so we do a lot of, like, it's a big question. I mean, because if they're not engaged, in our case, they're not going to convert. So it's kind of like a huge moment of truth. So I have one person who pretty much just does that. So, I mean, she does, like, kind of outreach more generally as well, but that's mostly her goal, is to engage with our users and kind of try and get them to come.
Just a comment I'll make on that too, because we do a lot of those things, although we don't have like the 14-day emails. But looking at usage is really important. But one of the things, remember I mentioned that this is a top-down industry. One big learning I had years ago, one of the first places where we actually had teachers using our products. Remember our data warehouse was full of data geeks, but where we had teachers using it, we had rolled this out, and we had very good usage. So we were looking at the same stat-based application. We do that. We can see that they were continuing to use it. A large percentage of them were using this thing every day. New superintendent came in, didn't know anything about the product. And the first thing he did was said, okay, I don't need a data warehouse. Pull the plug. And in fact, he said, what I need are principals who know their students better. And I tried to have a conversation with him. Well, you know that there's data in here that can help your friends. It's like, nope, don't even have this conversation. It's like, can we part ways, nicely? I know I've got 2 years left on my contract, and I just want out. It's like, yeah, we can part ways nicely. And then we had teachers calling us up, because remember they're going to our web-based system, and they call the 800 number, but how come the data's not up to date? It's like, didn't even figure out the So really, being engaged at the strategy level is really important in this top-down industry, because even when you've got people who are using the stuff and love it, here, that's not necessarily good enough, unfortunately.
What would make it easier for you guys and other tech entrepreneurs to do what
Well, I think the buying process is really complicated, and there are a lot of people that are involved. So just because a principal likes something or a superintendent likes something, there are multiple decision makers, and in most cases, there are actually multiple veto decision makers, more so than just like, that often is their biggest goal, like a lot of the people that can incorporate into the decision. So that's I think a challenge, is that is part of why it takes so long to kind of do it. The districts are also super, it's very diffuse. There's a lot of fragmentation. It's a pretty fragmented market. So in Massachusetts, for example, there are like 300 or 400 districts. So if you do what Shawn does and you go to the state and you sell, that's amazing. But if you're trying to go school to school, that can take a really long time. So I think things that have worked well are now they're kind of like educational and collaboratives. So groups that are making buying decisions for groups of schools or groups of districts. And so that's one way. There are 400 districts, but there are like less than 25 educational collaboratives in Massachusetts. So now that, I don't know how long those have been around, but that makes it easier because then you can kind of you don't have to go through the selling process for every single person. I would really say that for me, the way that buying happens or purchasing happens or procurement, that's the biggest challenge. If that was easier, I think it would be easier overall because, teachers used to have, some schools give teachers budget. You had a budget, right? Some schools give teachers a budget of how much they get for classroom supplies. And there used to be a tax write-off for up to $500, I think, of teachers spending out of pocket, and teachers do out of pocket spend about $500 a year. But I think that tax write-off ended like in December. So even that, like if you were gonna have individual teachers buy, I don't know, that's another.
I'd say the thing that would change it is when it's more when the decisions are closer to the consumer, the student. That will change a lot. And it does. It happens in some places. But the fact that the decision-making process is usually pretty darn far away from that, leads to all of these kind of issues. We're talking about a very slow decision process there, and lots of people can say no, and almost no one can actually just say yes.
How long did it take you to get your first state deal?
Our first state deal, we've been at it 5 or 6 years, and we actually started out with individual districts and then collaboratives, in New York, and then it eventually spread statewide, and then we started winning state deals kind of from the top down. So we did it from the bottom up, and then all the way across and then top down. So other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I have no doubt that education startup is like a huge value to the whole society, but if we looking at the valuation of the education startup, usually it's not so high, especially compared to like social gaming or IM, which I don't know which kind of social value are they creating, but why do you think the valuation is not so high, or what is the bottleneck to prevent the education startup to have a higher valuation?
Well, I think, and Parul can jump in here too, but I think we had mentioned that the biggest issue is people see how inefficient, and I'll just use that word, not saying that teachers are bad and teachers are inefficient, but that the industry is inefficient in making decisions and deploying not just technology, but deploying change. And so people look at this industry and go, all right, it's going to keep doing the same thing it's been doing for 100 years. And anybody who's trying to do things differently, the amount of change that they're going to accomplish is going to be marginal compared to any other industry. Because remember I was at Procter & Gamble. I mean, consumer packaged goods is completely different today than it was 30 years ago. And Walmart, we built the first data warehouse for Walmart. It's like, that's changed everything in retail here for everybody. Okay, and now I'm 17 years into it in education, and we've had an impact. We have. We're doing valuable things that people are willing to pay us for. But compared to any of the rest of these industries, and if you're, like I said, if you're doing this to, to really build value and do it fast, you're in the wrong industry. And investors recognize that. So when you look at valuations and then you say, okay, look at, my trailing revenue is X and my revenue growth rate is Y, and you go, gosh, if I were Facebook, then I'd be worth $3 billion. And you go, oh, you're not Facebook, you're actually in the education industry. And that's where we are. You go, I see these companies, get acquired by, Facebook or Google, and you see, my goodness, it's like I'd be worth that much. And actually, just a comment on this. I mean, look at Google. Okay, their business model was give away Google Apps for free, in education. You're free. Well, of course, it's a Google model. I mean, they're actually mining the data and using that for marketing purposes. Well, okay, April 30th, I believe, here, they stopped doing that because they had to. So now all of a sudden, I mean, okay, Google can afford this. But they had something that was generating revenue for them. This was profitable for them, and now it's generating zero based on that business model that they had. And this was because of a lot of this privacy concern that came out of Inblue. Well, it can happen. It can happen to Google. It can happen to anybody. Thankfully, we don't want to sell data. But people recognize that too. These things become seemingly kind of out of the blue. Google wasn't hiding what they were doing. It was all in their license agreement. But now all of a sudden everybody got concerned about it. Bang, that revenue's gone.
We're at time.
But if anybody has any questions and I can help you in any way, please contact me at Parul@gradeable.com. No, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you all. And if you want to contact us, I've got a business card to anything that we can do to be helpful here in starting your business or focusing on education. Hopefully I didn't scare you away too bad. Probably did for some people, but yeah, I'm trying to tell you. Thank you very much.
Guys, just a quick announcement. Tomorrow we have another session with Alice, that's the co-founder of Spike. That's a tech company that's developed some interesting stuff related to